Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. We are here today, and I'm excited to be with you on today. And you see in the studios myself and my producer, Jonathan. We call him John B in the place to be. What's good, John?
Hello.
All right, so we're excited. I'm excited about this conversation because this conversation is a continuation of one that we had on last week. If you did not catch last week's session, you might want to go back and listen to last week's session, which they can do so where, Jonathan?
Easiest way to find it is go to WSGW.com, click on podcasts, find United Shades of Gray.
And you'll find us there. And the reason why is because the entire world, let's just be clear, the entire world has become a very divisive place. And we have conversations that I think that are always very heated, conversations that many times we don't agree on, but you see us coming back week after week. So on last week, we started a conversation, and I think in the midst of the conversation, we were talking about what the world was talking about, and the issues relating to Charlie Kirk, his passing, his demise. And I think that unless you are a sincere moron, the entire world would agree that political crime of anywhere. I work with organizations that fight and combat crime, this type of crime specifically, gun violence. So I never think that it's good. I am a believer in the Second Amendment, as I said before. So I do enjoy having and being a licensed firearm carrier. But on last week, our conversation went on, and we began to talk about some of the things that feelings. And so I began a conversation, and much of the conversation, I will admit sincerely, and I did immediately after the show, talking with Jonathan. And I recognized that I was taking more of that conversation when we were talking, and that wasn't done unintentionally. And part of the reason is because I think that oftentimes, especially on this platform, when Jonathan speaks and his perspectives often are more in alignment with what the intended audience or the intended listener is for this show. And so I wanted us to be able to put those thoughts out there and have that conversation. And when we got off, Jonathan let me know, quite honestly, that he was really frustrated and he was hurt. And I don't think he was going to tell me that initially, but he was just showing, I want to say what you said to me.
Yep.
I want to be, he goes, Kareem, I have a lot of respect for you. And I want to forget that this past hour even happened because I have so much respect for you, but I don't respect what you said. And I respect that. And I told him in that moment, my intention is never to hurt anybody. There's a lot of things that may be said about what I said and how you feel it. And I respect the fact that you have your opinion. That's what I love. I believe that before the Second Amendment, right, we have something called the First Amendment, right? And I respect folks' both views on both of those. And so in that moment, I said, you know what? I want to make sure I shared with him what I just said, but I want to make sure that we hear you, because at the end of the day, when someone is your friend or someone is, I don't even think they have to be your friend, but when you are a well-intended individual, a part of what you want to do is to make sure that people have the ability to speak their truth and to speak how they feel. And so I said to him, I said, this is what the plan is. So next week, I want to take a step back and I really want to listen to your thoughts and your perspectives. He said something to me that I didn't know before the show, which probably would have made a big difference, because he told me that he had listened and kind of Charlie Kirk represented a particular thing in terms of how you view, not that you agree with everything that he said, but there were certain things and ideologies that were consistent with how you felt. And you personally felt a sense of loss. Now, because he is, not just because he's my producer, but because I'm a caring individual and because he's my friend, I never want to hurt him. And so I said, I want to take some time for us to have that conversation. I want to hear what you have to say, which I'm sure a lot of our audience members are like, yeah, we want to hear it. But I definitely want to make sure that we're creating a space. We talk about courageous conversations. And so I think that this is that moment. So I'm going to decrease in this moment. I want to turn it over to you so that we can have some response. And when you need a dialogue, I'll be here for that as
I
well.
appreciate that. I'm glad you started there, because that's the one thing that I wanted to start with as well, is that's what this show is for.
Absolutely.
It's for modeling respectful conversations of people coming at it from a place of good faith. It's not another talking head show. It's not.
I'm not sure what a talking head show is, but I'm going to agree that that's not what I want to be. I don't want to be a talking
When
head.
you listen and it's just one person,
No,
blah, blah.
No.
And we've received quite a few complaints about last week's episode. Kareem, I want you to know, you're not alone in the having received complaints on WSGW camp. We get complaints about shows all the time. You're not you're not being singled out here.
No, I recognize that, but I do recognize that I knew that when I pitched the show for this station.
Yep.
And I didn't shy away from that because I think that when we have heated exchanges, first of all, someone's truth is first going to tick you off. But then oftentimes that conversation that comes after can set you free.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that what we're doing, even if we may not ever agree on a particular thing, I think that we always have to be adults in the room.
I think there
to
have
be
been
able to
like
listen and have conversations.
3 times
Yeah, we've
that
had
you,
them.
me, and Mark have all agreed on something.
Yeah,
So,
I thought you were going to say there's been those times where we've never agreed and we end up heated at the end.
I think there's like 3 times when we have agreed all on the same thing.
So.
But to have these civil discussions, it requires coming at it from a place of good faith.
Absolutely.
And I was mad after last week's show. I'm way less hot under the collar now, and I'm glad. But what I did over the last week is
Can I tell you what I'm thankful about?
Yep.
Because when we ended the show, you were really upset, and I recognize that. But I wanted you to express to me what was the thing, one, that hurt you, because I never want to hurt you. But 2, I also wanted to hear what you were angry about. Because sometimes we can be angry and all of these things come out when we feel a particular way.
Yep.
But it's important for us to be able to have that cooling off period and then come back and engage.
And there's a difference between being angry and being hateful.
Absolutely.
And that's something
Say that one again.
There is a difference between being angry and being hateful. I was angry at you, Kareem, and I still am a little bit angry at you.
And
but there's nothing but mutual respect and love. Like that's where it comes from. But what I did over the last week is I was thinking about it. I'm like, what bothered me? What really bothered me? So I went back and I listened to last week's show twice.
Mm-hmm.
I listened all the way through it, and I think I figured out kind of what got under my skin. We're supposed to be a place to have civil discussions, come at it from a place of good faith. And I think one of the easiest ways to destroy civil discussion and shut it down while not looking like you are is to slap labels on people.
Okay.
I think that is one of the easiest things to do, and it's something that everybody does, and it's something that I have done. And looking back, I go, "Ooh, that wasn't very good." That's something that just a Democrat would say. That's something a black person would say. That's something a white supremacist would say. So you're just slapping labels on people so that you can put them in a box and disregard what they're saying, and it's a way to avoid engaging with the actual content of their argument.
Okay. I'll receive that.
Okay.
I didn't feel that way, but I'm definitely open to hearing what you have to say.
Okay. And I think it's a form of ad hominem where you're attacking the person, not the argument. I think that kind of understanding of rhetoric is you need at least a little bit of it.
I agree.
When you're going to have these conversations. When someone defines themselves as something, they open themselves up to that, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
I define myself as a conservative, so you can go after me as a conservative. I don't define myself as a racist. So if you call me a racist and you go after me as a racist,
it evokes a feeling and a thought. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So kind of with that in mind, I went through and I listened, and there were some labels that you put on Charlie Kirk. And
let's talk about
that's what bothered me.
Okay.
The first one was racist.
Okay.
Right off the top, called him a racist. That's not something most people identify themselves as.
Would you agree that I'm not alone?
You're not alone in
that
applying that.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean it's true.
But it doesn't mean that it's not true as well, right? It means that is my particular opinion on how I view it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But when we're having these discussions, you got to be able to back it up, Kareem.
Okay.
And the evidence, I'll call it, because it's not a debate, but kind of is, you presented was misrepresented and out of context quotations from him.
Okay.
And it's one of those, you can't just you can't just buy into that and regurgitate it as a reason. And I don't think that's the kind of person you are.
I'm not
normally.
And so I'm expecting that you're going to express to me how those things are inaccurate.
I could.
Okay.
I don't think it's very useful. If you want to bring up some quotes, and I'll tell you I can tell you the context behind a few of the ones you brought up last week.
Okay.
But I don't know that that's necessarily useful.
Well,
if you'd like, we can get into that.
Well, the only reason being, and I'll leave this to you.
I think it is worth getting into.
Yeah, I was going to say the only reason being, to say that to have the opinion that something that I said was inaccurate or untrue. I think this is an educational space. Okay. So I would love for you to share with me what you think. It may make a difference.
And this is a lot of stuff that's circulating online, circulating in a lot of these talking head shows where there's just echo chambers going on. And it's a lot of these quotes that have been taken out of context. And the one that I think gets is bandied about the most is this: if I see a black pilot, Charlie Kirk saying, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to wonder, is that person qualified? And I made the point last week, you got to take this stuff in context.
Okay. Give me context.
So he went on a different podcast later. He did in context kind of explain it, but in a different podcast later, the context for that was in 2021, United Airlines came out with an initiative where 50% of their new pilots were going to be women or people of color. We've talked about quotas as a way of implementing DEI on this show before, and I've disagreed with it. I think you've disagreed with quota implementation.
Well, in a particular way, and I'll explain. Go ahead.
So it was hyperbole, absolutely. But he went on to say, I don't want to have to think like that. So if you know that 50% of the pilots aren't going to be chosen based solely on merit, it's going to be once they fill up 50% with white guys. So if they've got 100 open slots and out of the first 75 candidates, 50 of them were white guys, well, we're not considering white guys anymore. So they keep going down the list. Oh, there's a woman. We'll give her a slot. Oh, white guy. There's a black guy. Okay, we'll give him a slot. You're narrowing the field. And when you openly announce that you're going to do that, you force people to think racially. When I'm getting on a plane and I see a black pilot, I think, was he one of those first 75 that was chosen based solely on merit? Or did they skip over 15 other people because of their race? And Kirk's point in saying that was, I don't want to think like that. I don't want that to be a thing. But when you prioritize race as a hiring practice, you make people wonder. There's that voice in the back of the head.
Okay. And I understand that, but there's a problem in the premise that was presented. I feel like we're sitting here doing, what was it? That was the name of the thing that he would do when he would sit down.
Oh, prove me wrong.
Yeah, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
There's a problem with that premise, and the problem with that premise that I often hear from many of my friends, and I need you to understand that this isn't a premise that I've been fighting or that I've had to be confronted with, I should say, like just more recently since Charlie Kirk. This is something that as a teenage black male that was at the top of his class, in the top 5% of his class, that got scholarships both athletically and academically when I went away to college. That was one of the voices of, top 40, under 40, and particularly I've always achieved very highly in whatever area that it was. So this isn't a premise that is hypothetically coming now. It's something that I've had to deal with my entire life. And that premise would lead to say that whenever you say that you are going to, I use the word quota, when you're going to invest in the diversity of a particular institution or a company, that it means that you also, in that same token, are losing the qualifications that are important for that. One of the things that has to be important is that if American Airlines or Delta Airlines or whatever airline company says something of that nature, if folks don't meet the standards, if folks don't meet the regulations, if they can't pass the test, they can't fly a plane. True. And so I think that's important. But I think that I want to take a look at this, and I think that this is important to flip this on the other side, and I want to toss it back to you. quotas, DEI, affirmative action. Why were those things created? That is a question. Why were those things created in the first place?
I want to address something you said
Okay.
a little bit earlier. Yes, they all have to pass those qualifications. Yes,
Mhm.
they all have to do that. When I'm getting in an airplane, when I'm going under a surgeon's knife, when I'm
Especially.
being driven around, I want the best.
Absolutely.
I don't care that you got the piece of paper. I want the best.
Absolutely.
That's my contention there.
Why were those
Why was
policies created?
DEI and affirmative action and all of that created? It comes from a place of, and we've talked about this many times on this show. It comes from a place of inequality in origin is the way that it's kind of justified. Is people don't have the same starting point, so if someone has more resources growing up in school, whatever, that difference is made up for at a later time in order to give someone else equal standing or opportunity.
I want to say this in response, in addition to what you said, and I want to put this contextually in a place of the framework of this entire conversation. I was born in 1973. Okay, so those of you who can do math, that makes me 52 years old. And in the 1970s, late 1970s, early 1980s, when I'm just a young man, barely a teenager, 12, 13, this conversation was pervasive then about how it was wrong that the landscape was unequal. It's unfair for Black people to have. And the interesting thing is that these policies were only put in place in the 1960s. If I leave from my birth date to the date that these were put in place, we're looking at 64, 68. 5 years later, I'm here, and that conversation had already, it's unfair that Black people should be getting jobs that they're not qualified for because of these quotas. And I'm saying that for a reason, because if that was the sentiment then, and 5 years, that was 5, 6, 7 years after these things were put in place, then there was a feeling that I don't want to give up this anyways. However you do this, this is always going to be unfair. But I say that because Mr. Kirk was 31 years old. He is from suburbia America. Family was well-to-do. I think his father was one of the architects from the company that the Trump Towers was built up. And so what I'm saying is that he does not come from a community where competing with an African-American male is a problem, or where Black people are even pervasive, strongly in those communities. And even yourself, Jonathan. And so I'm saying this because I want to invoke an understanding that these were things that were never even an issue, but we see this continually being brought to the forefront, that somehow affirmative action meant giving jobs to Blacks where they weren't qualified, or where somehow it was a standard down. But when we take a look at this in reverse, it wasn't that Blacks were never qualified for those roles. It was the fact that white men were giving these roles to their cousins, to their nephews, to their children, and were maligning and even discluding Blacks to be even considered. So in that situation, there are a lot of people who had a job that came from the 1800s. Their family created businesses on textiles and industries and plants where Black people weren't even allowed to work in those places. The CEO continued through the lineage of those families, excluding the most qualified person over nepotism. So what DEI came in and said, listen, we have to have a diverse population. We want to make investments in community where they haven't had access. They've been denied access over these years. And we want to create the opportunity for everyone to shine. So when we go in, everyone has to be qualified. Everyone has to meet a certain standard of excellence. And from that population, we're going to consciously give place for individuals who have been maligned by the government to have access finally to places that they've not been able to.
So I understand the historical context for it. Yeah, this stuff has been in place for a long time, and it's continually being pushed further and further. More money is being placed into these initiatives. More effort is being put into DEI. The point being, race being a weighted factor in this kind of thing diminishes qualification.
Go ahead.
It diminishes quality.
Okay.
In terms of you and I on the same page, we have identical resumes.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, if race is not a part of it, you should get the job half the time. I should get the job half the time. If race is a part of it, you'll get the job more often than I do.
Well, the problem with that understanding is that the people who are doing the hiring have to have an equal, non-biased opinion. In this country, Black people make up less than 1% of the CEOs that are in this nation. And I want to go back to make sure that we correct this other identity, this understanding, is that when we look at statistically what has been the benefactor to both affirmative action and diversity, equity, and inclusion, the benefactor of that has not been Black men or Black women or Black women who are the most educated base in our nation across every dynamic. It has always been white women, and that's statistically proven.
I have a question before we go to break here,
Yeah.
and I understand it's not fair to give this question to you as we're in the last minute here. Does arguing against DEI and affirmative action in those programs make someone racist?
We'll have that conversation. I think that's a fair question. Does arguing against those programs? No, it makes them short-sighted, which is the reason why I was sharing that there is a need to put these things contextually. Charlie Kirk was 31 years old upon his demise, and had no interaction with Black folks to any major degree in terms of how he was raised, in terms of where he lived, and in terms of his engagement. Now, growing up, of course, there was interaction. We see those clips with him with African Americans in the world. But we'll continue this conversation. We're going to take a quick commercial break. We'll be back with more of United Shades of Gray. I can't read with my glasses.
Our mics are still hot.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
This is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Gray. If you guys are out there, I have my glasses on and I'm trying to see Jonathan and look at the comments. So I'm sitting here looking kind of crazy. But before the break, Jonathan, you posed a question. And once again, what was the question again?
We were talking about the issues of DEI and some quotes by Charlie Kirk referencing arguments about DEI. And I asked, does arguing against DEI make somebody racist?
No, I don't think so. I think that it means that they're misinformed on the data and the outcomes. I think that those are not reasons why I would consider him a racist. There are a lot. Mark is one of my good friends, one of my closest friends, I asked him to be on this show. And I want to make sure that our listeners understand that.
Yeah.
That the dynamics of this, I wasn't forced into this space. I wasn't asked to be in this space. This show actually existed because it was something that I thought would be great for us to have these kind of conversations. And so when we look at this, I had Mark come in and I said, Mark, I think you would be great. I was asked, hey, what do you think about Jonathan as a producer? I'm like, hey, he's different. He has a very different opinion. I like him because you sat in a couple of times. And I said, I like the way you present arguments.
The very first conversation that we had,
yeah,
we sat down, and I think the first thing I said to you was, I don't think we're going to agree on a whole lot.
And I was like, that's why I want you. I mean, so I think that it's important. I'm not a person who needs a bunch of sycophants around. I like the idea that we have a show that is going to be very different, that we are going to sometimes leave here heated. We're not going to agree. We're going to be upset. We're going to be angry. But the idea of this show is that we are United Shades of Gray. And so that means that we're muting the red side and the blue side. Even though we say the reds are the Republicans, the blues are the Democrats, in order for us to be the kind of nation that we really need to be, we've got to get upset sometimes. We've got to say things that we are able to mean, but then we've got to allow ourselves the grace to come back and have a conversation. And so it's really about bringing the grown-up out of ourselves and back into the room. As you said, when you were on with Art, and I want to thank Art because Art said, listen, I don't agree with what Kareem said either, but we talk about the importance of the First Amendment and being able to express your opinion and what you think. And we are good, I think, to the point that we not only talk about our opinions, but we try to bring facts in when appropriate. And so I want to thank him for doing so as well. But yeah, go ahead. So that was one of the issues. That's not why I would call Charlie, what I would use the term or label him a racist. It has nothing to do with his disdain for affirmative action. I think that there are people on the Democratic side, the Republican side, and independents who all struggle with that.
Why would you call him a racist?
It would be because of his statements. And let me be clear. There are people that I feel like are very much, we start talking about the Fuenteses of the world, that are very undisputably so.
That's what I think is dangerous. I don't think it's dangerous. That's what I think is intellectually dishonest. When you start calling speech dangerous, problems happen.
Yeah.
That's what I think is intellectually dishonest about calling someone a racist, is it automatically lumps everybody in under this one label. Like, are they the, well, I don't think DEI is a good idea racist, or are they the cross-burning, hood-wearing racists?
I don't think saying I got you. I don't think saying that DEI, you're against DEI, is racist. I don't.
Okay, but you understand what I'm saying.
But what I do think is racist, and I think that words matter. A part of what I studied when I was in school was linguistics. It was the study of words, Spanish language and culture. So words do matter, and they are important. And the words that we use can incite things, sometimes unknowingly, that because we don't understand the power of those words, right? What I think is racist is when I look at how he frames and he uses, and I've heard this on several times. And honestly, I'm the type of person, I want to look for a place where I might be wrong, or where maybe I've taken something wrong. So I'm going to go and I searched YouTube channels. I went to Turning Point, all of those things, because I wanted to make sure if I say, or I have an opinion about something, I want to make sure that it's rooted in something that I truly believe is true. And I feel cemented in that fact. And what I mean by this, so his statements toward African-American women, very prominent, and women that he knows that are very prominent. When we took Judge Jackson, Supreme Court Justice Jackson, Kamala Harris, First Lady Obama, these are women that when you look in the African-American community are considered royalty. And that point was not lost with him. I don't believe it was. I think he understood that. But to say that he didn't think that they could muster up, enough, and these are my words because the phrasing is off, but they could not muster up enough intelligence to be able to take a job from a white person without affirmative action. That's problematic. And I think that is racist, because now he has assigned these Black women, which race, and that was a part of the conversation, to a particular ability to understand it. That's a racist perspective. And he didn't say it once. He came back to clarify in other podcasts and other places, and he doubled down on the concept, even though he would make it, a little bit more palatable based upon who that conversation was with. But to me, that's a racist perspective. And that's one, to say that Dr. Martin Luther King was an idiot or was not a smart guy. He didn't, whatever that was. And I can't remember in this moment because I've listened to these things over and over and over again, searching, but we get what that means. I think that also was a racist, to say that the Civil Rights Bill, based upon the merit, that it should have never been written or signed into legislation, understanding, even with the explanation that he gave, but understanding what it meant. And this is why I have to part some of his racist dialogue to the fact that he was young to a certain degree and didn't really understand the impact of what that legislation meant to Black people. And a lot of that could have been, like I said, to his misunderstanding. I think sometimes people say and do racist things because they don't have a full perspective. Sometimes people do racist things because they know and they continue. I think that's a different perspective. But I think that sometimes it is lost because they don't have an awareness of what their words are actually meaning when they say them.
I can understand that, and to a certain degree, I can get behind that. The comments about MLK are not something new. That's not unique to Charlie Kirk. And there's
right. I didn't say that he was the only
there's
person.
room for conversation in there.
What would be the room for the conversation? I'm curious, because he's somebody that I consider beloved, and I see them folks saying he is
trying to degrade his reputation in different ways.
Yeah.
Calling
So I'm
him
curious.
communist, calling him a womanizer, and all of these other things.
Which would be no different than most of our presidents.
That's an attack on character, and I think it's stupid. I got to be honest, place of ignorance, I haven't investigated that part of the argument very much.
Okay.
That's
fair.
The comments about Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris, at that point, it's a public figure, and I understand that he put it in the context of race. But people put prominent white figures in the context of race all the time when it comes to violence.
So my question, Jonathan, so are you going to defend that type of response, or because I think this is fair?
It's a deflection.
Absolutely.
Yep, I agree.
Because, one thing that I don't like is to have conversations, and I say this to my family all the time. If I come to you and I say that this is a problem, you did this, the appropriate response would be, okay, well, let's handle that. Let's talk about it. Not to say, well, you did this over here, because now we're being children and we're not really discussing the issue.
My point being, in the realm that he was at, where he is at a certain level, communicating with and against people at the same level, that's the rhetoric.
Okay.
Do I think it's right? No. But that is the rhetoric with the people at the level where he was.
When you say that you don't think it right, I want to understand, what do you mean you don't think it's right?
I mean, saying that Republicans or Democrats, right or left, they're violent people, saying white people are violent people, saying black people are violent people. I think that is insightful. Not insightful, but with a C,
But that he has been on a podcast where he has said that black people are quite violent, and when given the opportunity to incite violence against white Americans, they take it every time. He said that. Those were his words. And so those are the things, when you see me take a very passionate stance on something, and I think that it's important for America to understand that. And really, the funny thing is, I swayed away from the terminology, and if you remember, I corrected. I said maybe I shouldn't say that that was racist, because to me, being racist implies that you have the power to control it or have some insight on an outcome. White supremacist is a different understanding, and people are like, oh my gosh, they clutch their pearls when I use the term white supremacist, but I've explained it before, and I think it's worth expressing now in this context, that white supremacy, America, I think, white America tends to think that I'm talking about swastikas and the Klan uniform. That's not what white supremacy is. White supremacy, that what the opinions, the thoughts, the ideologies, the culture, the manner, the understanding of a particular race, in this particular situation, white America, the way they see it, the way they view it, the way they feel about it, is a predominant and the best way. And so that is white supremacy. And so much of what he has done, and what we were saying, we're using the term racist because sometimes we don't make those distinctions, but more of a white supremacist perspective.
Yeah. I'm glad we unpacked this. I want to leave time to talk about a few other things.
Yeah.
Because I know we discussed before we went on the air.
Absolutely.
A few other things. To borrow a Charlie Kirk saying, we have clarity, but not agreement.
And that's fair.
And I
think that's fair.
And it's okay to end a conversation with clarity, but not agreement.
I think there's another conversation that in all of this, I think is taking a bigger stage. And I think it's a conversation that you and I, as brothers in Christ, is probably more meaningful to me.
I'm going to say this. Okay. I want to leave about 4 minutes at the end to talk about something. Continue.
Okay. And it's just the perspective of someone, and these are sound bites. If he was here from one of our legislators, our national legislators, if he was here today, or if he was alive in the times of the Bible, that he would have been the 13th disciple. This sainthood of him, and it's not just because of him, but it's someone left their church because their church didn't mention him And my understanding is that Christ is the center of being a Christian. And if it's not centered in Christ, then what is it? What is it for?
The reaction to his death. You talked about the demonization of Charlie Kirk being weird last year. I called it evil and abhorrent and awful.
Yeah.
I think the deification of Charlie Kirk has gone too far.
Yeah.
I understood, like, when the Yankees had a moment of silence the day that it happened. I get that. But over the weekend, when a bunch of NFL teams are having a moment of silence, when there's days of remembrance being put into place, when it's becoming, I'm glad that it's bringing people back to church. This is what I wanted to talk about. I think he was a man of faith, a man of God, and I think that drove a lot of his actions. But I think that he has been revered to a degree that does take a lot of the focus away from Christ. I think you are correct in that analysis. And even some of the stuff that his team has been putting out, not all of it. To a certain degree, I understand the memorial stuff, but there are some things that
weird.
People got to back off a little bit.
I want to go back because I want to make this distinction. I think that a lot of Black America is angered by this concept, and I think I want to put it out there. And those of you out there in the social media stream, I appreciate the things that you guys are saying, and I'm taking light and we're looking at this, and I want your comments. So we may not be able to put them all up, but if you put them in the stream, because I think that this is a real dialogue that's important. I will give you that he is a man of faith. I believe that he had strong convictions as they related to biblical principles and things and ideologies. And I think that he himself would consider himself to be a Bible lover and someone who would have fashioned himself after the Bible. Go ahead.
That's not what you said last week.
Well, no. I'm going to correct. I'm qualifying because when we think about it, we want to make sure that we're clearly stating it. And as you did, when I left here, because I offended and I hurt someone that I care about, let me go back and really take a look at these things. And I was sending you stuff. We're sending stuff back because I think that is the thing that is most important. We set a standard that in this space that we would protect one another and we would be sensitive to how the other person felt. And I wanted to make sure that even though I'm the host, I could have went on and say, we're not talking about it, whatever, but that's not the kind of person that I am. And so when I look at it, I believe that he is a man of faith. Now, what I also believe, I have problems when we say that he is a man of God, because I think those two things are very different. And what I mean by that is this. There's a lot of, and throughout history, people have read the Bible and they have come up with understandings of what the Bible meant. And oftentimes their actions were not consistent with the actions or the theology that Christ presents in the gospel. And this is what I mean. My being here and having this conversation, it's because I am a man of God. My sitting down and really giving people another opportunity who have done me wrong, it's because I am a man of God. The word of God says that God is love. And love covers a multitude of sins. And the fact that I can even take the time to consider where I may have been wrong, or maybe I've mischaracterized Charlie, is because I am a man of faith and I am a man of God. Because God requires that we prefer others more than ourselves, that we speak the truth in love. If you believe what Charlie said, okay, I give you that right, but it's declaring and speaking these truths in love. And I think that since God is love, for us to be men of God, we have to be able to show and to display through our actions and our words, we have to show that we have love toward one another. And so I struggle with how the church, whatever church that is, the placement of the church places him. I struggle with, and I'm sad that Mark is in here, how the Catholic Church is trying to recharacterize how he felt about the Catholic Church, because some of the things that he disagreed with the Catholic Church were things that I disagreed with. So we were not millions of years apart, but I would never want you to take the things that I say in vitriol or in a hatred manner and attribute those to godly character.
Okay.
But I think that's what we've done in this particular situation with him in many ways.
I don't.
Okay.
I think if you love someone, you're going to be willing to tell them the truth. If you love someone and they're an alcoholic, is it a loving thing to say, I can't be a part of your life while you're in this state?
I think that's fair.
I think that is a loving thing to do. And so I think it is a loving thing when you believe someone is erring, politically even, to explain that position and seek dialogue with them in the way that Charlie did. And I don't see hatred in his words. I see love in the action of trying to bring others to the table. Do I believe there was narcissism in Charlie Kirk? 100%. Kareem, to work in any media space, you need to be a narcissist. You have narcissism. I have narcissism. Everybody who sits behind a mic, you've got to have a certain amount of narcissism to think people care what you have to say.
I don't. I laugh when people care, actually. And narcissism would mean that I would sit here and I would have this conversation, understanding that a lot of people wouldn't agree with what I've said. I'm going to be understanding. Narcissism and understanding and empathy don't go hand in hand. So I would like that I not be characterized with that narcissism. Do I have some tendencies that may show up from time to time? I don't live there.
We had a psychologist on the show who said you have a healthy amount of narcissism, Kareem.
Healthy.
Yes.
Healthy.
But for anybody to do what we do, you have to think people are listening.
Mm-hmm. And that was taken out of context. You could just put that out of context. But anyway, I got what you're saying. I'm joking with you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Where was I? Yeah, no, I think there was narcissism, and I think the higher up you get on this listenership scale, I think he probably had a little bit of an inflated ego because of that. I don't think that's an unfair thing to say. But I think that in that, you can still speak truth. And I think, where was I totally got derailed here with the narcissism conversation there. I think my point being, the way that you put things and the assertions that you make, the more confident you are in them because of what you think other people think of you, the less loving they're probably going to sound.
Okay.
Is that reasonable to say? We see that at the highest levels of everything. But I think all in all, the fact that he was willing to listen, he was willing to give voice to people that he disagreed with, that he was the sit down and talk about it guy, even if it was to confront the arguments. I think that's a loving act. I don't think that what he did was contrary to biblical action.
Okay. Well, we're going to be closing this out. I'm sure we're going to end, but we're not going to be done. I think allowing a person to talk and hearing a person are two different things. Much of what he did was create a platform where he would allow you to say something and then he would spew his thoughts at you. The last thing that I want to say is when you talk about narcissism, I see it evenly, clearly. The fact that and this is where I was going before, a young 31-year-old white guy from the suburbs could define for Black America what their problems were, what the problems with Black men were, what the problems with Black family were. Those things are beyond narcissists. They are almost godlike in nature, and that's problematic.
You're using the last 30 seconds to make a dig, Kareem.
Well,
I
no,
would ask you to stop.
It's not a dig, but I'm closing out the show, and I'm going to continue because I think that those are the things that were most problematic in Black America. He has never been Black. He has never lived in the hood. And to say that he understood what the problems with Black families was not only narcissistic, but downright wrong. We got to go. You guys have a great, amazing time. 6th Day, we'll be back next week with more United Shades of Gray.